everybody, and welcome back to Coffee with Craig. We very much appreciate you guys tuning in and being part of the conversation. Please make it a point to like and share this video feed so that your friends can join into the conversation. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as follow our Facebook page so that you can receive all of our action alerts and know what's going on as it is happening. Want to also remind you, we also have fpcgear.com up and running. Very cool stuff. I know there's stuff there that you guys are going to want. Father's Day is right around the corner, and I'm sure Dad would like, especially, I know if your dad supports the Second Amendment, I know he would very much appreciate being able to have one of these very nice shirts in order to help promote the Second Amendment. We've got these and many more designs. And you can also know that the resources, the money that you spend buying these T-shirts also goes to help in the fight for our rights. So please go to fpcgear.com, check it out, buy some cool stuff. Moving right along. So I live here in Sacramento, and it's kind of interesting. The Sacramento Bee has been kind of, it's a local newspaper. It's here in the obviously here in the Sacramento area. And it was interesting that I just the other day I saw a guy who's a columnist for the for the newspaper, the Sacramento Bee, actually posting or doing a post encouraging people to subscribe digitally to the Sacramento Bee because it's the only way that local journalism is going to stay alive. And I just I found it interesting, and then sure enough, not long after that, I come across an op-ed. An op-ed that clearly demonstrates how out of touch clearly folks on the editorial board there at the Sacramento Bee are with reality and with the people who largely make up the Sacramento region. Now, once again, we're not talking about the city of Sacramento, which tends to be very left-leaning and anti-civil rights. But specifically, I'm talking about the Sacramento region, and in this op-ed, they decided to take a report that came from the Center for Disease Control, and what they noted in this, and trust me, there's a whole bunch of stuff they extrapolated out of nothing, but they decided to take California's suicide rate among America's lowest, maybe because we control guns. Now, one of the things that they're amongst the many things that they ignore in their particular analysis is the fact of actually what the study actually points out. And the study specifically points to, in this particular case, doesn't so much talk about the suicide rate in California as much as how much it has, or in the various states, as much as how much it has increased from state to state. But I'll even leave that alone. But what they recognize, or what they point out in this particular study is that, suicide rates have gone up less in California than they have in many other states. And so therefore, because it's gone up less, once again, they're saying it's down. They're saying it's lower, but that's not what's happened. They're saying because it's less, once again, that's not what happened. Well, then clearly maybe it's because we're going out of our way to keep guns out of the hands of people who are potentially suicidal. And they're doing this to push a measure that's Assembly Bill 1927, which would allow individuals to voluntarily add their name to this quote-unquote do not buy list, meaning, in essence, you go online, you put in your information, you say, I want to be added to the do not sell list, so that when you go to buy a gun, you are added to a list of people who are not allowed to purchase guns. And so no one will be able to sell you a firearm. Now, first we'll talk about just the logistical problems with this. So number one, there's nothing in the bill that makes it so that someone who may get access to your information can't go online and add your name to the list. So there's no criminal penalty for doing so either. So if it's found that someone went and added someone else's name to it, there's no criminal penalty included in the bill. But also there's no safeguards to keep them from being able to do this, to keep them from being able to unknowingly add your name to the list of people who are not allowed to purchase firearms. But the other problems with the bill is that, once again, if you're added to a do not sell list, and then the bill requires them to notify NICS. NICS is the National Background Check System. So now they say, well, this is not going to be a crime. So if you try to purchase a firearm and your name is on the list, it's not going to be a crime. Except that it is going to be a crime, because you can't, once you add someone to NICS, once someone is in NICS, the federal system, and they try to purchase a gun, they've broken federal law. So they may not be making it a state crime, but they're going to make it a federal crime. But see, the problem is the people on the editorial board there at the Sacramento Bee don't know or understand enough about firearm purchases, firearms law, to know that that's a possibility, to know that that's what's going to happen. So as they're pushing and promoting this bill out of their ignorance, and yes, I'm calling you there at the editorial board, the people who wrote this op-ed, I'm calling you ignorant. I hope you hear this. I hope you see this. Maybe I'll share it with you. But yes, when it comes to this topic and many, many others, you are completely ignorant, because that is, in fact, what will happen. And there's no safeguards in the bill to protect people from that, in fact, happening. But let's talk about this whole, but that's just the problems with the bill that you are pushing to advocate. But let's talk about the problems with your idea of, well, access to firearms increase the likelihood of suicide. Well, there are other places where they don't have access to firearms, and yet and still suicide is incredibly high. Let's take Australia, because y'all seem to love Australia and what Australia did when they banned guns. But yet they're in the midst of a massive suicide increase. Their suicide rate is peaking. It's going through the roof. But the firearms are banned there. How can this be? How can this possibly be? How can they be committing suicide? Because obviously, suicide should be down. Because, well, hey, it's different. It's different, isn't it? They don't have access to guns. Because they don't have access to guns, they must not be committing suicide. But that's not what's happening. Well, you know what? Obviously, Australia is an anomaly, right? That's not happening. There cannot be other industrialized countries where they don't have access to firearms and suicide is not going through the roof, right? That can't be the... Oh, wait. You're telling me in Japan they're committing suicide at massive numbers? Well, how massive? Wait. So you're telling me 6th. So they are number 6 of all countries in terms of their suicide rate in Japan, where they have no individual right to keep and bear arms. Well, they have no private ownership of firearms, but they're number 6. And amongst industrialized countries, they're number 2. Well, how could that be? See, the thing that they fail to realize is that if you actually broke it down on per capita ownership, based on ownership of firearms, in other words, what percentage of people, what percentage of the people actually own firearms compared to the percentage of people that commit suicide, I think you probably would see a significantly different number. Or maybe not. Anyway, my whole point here is this. My whole point in this particular thing, the whole thing that I'm trying to make here is this, is that being in a place where there are restrictions on guns does not mean that you are not that you are going to be reducing suicide. Because once again, you're not dealing with the core problem, the core issue of why people in this case are committing suicide. Instead, you are choosing to go after the tool. And as you go after the tool, you ignore the reason why. But here's the most interesting part. The most interesting part about what they're talking about. And when I looked at this, it was funny because when I went and I actually looked at the study, the study that I'm referring to here from the CDC, and you would think that they were talking about, well, suicide rates have gone down, right? But no, let's take a look here. So if you look the only place in which suicide rates have decreased is in Nevada, a place with much, much looser gun laws, a place where the right to keep and bear arms is actually respected. But you look at places like California. In places like California, take a look at it. Okay, it's increased less than other places in the nation. But so did Arizona, which has much freer gun laws than California. So did New Mexico, which has much looser gun laws than California. Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida. But then you also do have places like D.C. But the point that I'm trying to make here, folks, is that there is no real, based on what they're saying, there is no real correlation between guns and gun control and suicide. You can look at both ends of the spectrum. States with strict gun laws have the same exact rates of suicide as those with no gun control. So I'm sorry, Sacramento Bee. You be idiots. You be ignorant on this. But maybe you're not ignorant. Maybe you're just pushing your agenda. And so instead of using deductive reasoning, taking a look at all of the information that is available and applying it to the potential solution and then coming up with an answer, you already have an answer. And so you're going to manipulate data and information to support your conclusion and ignore everything else. And that, Sacramento Bee, is why you and other major newspapers are going defunct. That's why we stop reading you, because we can't trust the information that you put out there. You even base your first of all, you base your editorials on inaccurate information, on incorrect information, it's all biased because you only take in the data and the information that supports your final conclusion. And then in your reporting, well, let's just say I will at least give your reporters some credit. For the most part, they will report stories accurately. Maybe not fairly, but accurately. Now, I know you're wondering, what does that mean, Craig? That means that, and I'll give you my example with reporters with the Sacramento Bee have been this. When they call me and they want to talk about a particular item, a particular bill, or something that's going on, they will make sure that they report our position accurately. At least they'll report our position accurately. They may not always report the facts, the overall facts, accurately, but at least they report our position accurately. But it's almost always as kind of a throwaway quote near the end of the article, just to say, yeah, we talked to the other guys. Rarely do they ever discuss both sides of a particular issue fairly, giving both sides equal time within an article, giving full weight and acknowledgement to both sets of information that's being brought to the table. But once again, that's why newspapers like the Sacramento Bee, that's why they're on their way out of business. And it's kind of sad because I do happen to believe in journalism. I happen to believe in journalistic integrity. And I believe there was a time when that existed. Unfortunately, I think it's not as common as it used to be. I think it is more of a rarity these days, in particular in these major metropolitan publications where, their goal is to push a liberal agenda, not necessarily to communicate the facts as they are, or to report the news. I think maybe if your editorial room, if your editorial board was a little more weighted, a little more evenly weighted, with people from all different perspectives, who knows? Maybe that would change. But right now, Sacramento Bee, you get an epic fail on this particular op-ed. Anyway. All right, folks, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. We very much appreciate you guys tuning in. We appreciate you. We appreciate you doing things like joining the Firearms Policy Coalition at joinfpc.org. We appreciate you donating to the Firearms Policy Coalition. We appreciate you sharing everything that we put out there so that your friends can join in the fight for our civil rights. As we always say, this is a fight for our civil rights. Remember, have fun, stay safe, and stay free. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.